Hello, my name is Liza Maria, and today I'm glad to welcome on my podcast Kathy Reilly, which is a senior science communication, works with STEM, and she's also an artist and author. Hello, Mrs. Kathy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So, to start this podcast, can you tell us more about yourself, like your career?
Of course, I am what's considered sort of a hybrid person. Um, I have background in science, medicine, biology, microbiology, human health, as well as communications and outreach and ways to engage the public in science. And sort of my special sauce or my skill is to take really complex subjects in sciences across all sciences and distill it down, simplifying it for the general public to understand. And the reason why that's important for NASA is that the people who pay all of our bills is the American public, the American taxpayer. And they need to know where their money's going, what it's being used for, how is it impacting my life positively. So these are basically we're storytellers visually, with audio, with podcasts, with all sorts of really interesting creative venues. So pretty much any kind of being a good science communicator is critically important to funding, to being able to understand what it is. Three questions I always answer with most of my work is what is it? How does it work? And most importantly, why is it important? So if it's important to me, then I understand and I don't mind, you know, taxpayer dollars going towards it. But yeah, that's sort of my job in a nutshell.
So, as you mentioned, you worked with NASA, and I'm sure you have also projects. So, my question is, can you tell us some of your projects you did as a communication project manager, including the NIAC ones?
Sure. I started out in medical science as a researcher at a medical college and worked then at Yale for a number of years in molecular biology and sort of stumbled across NASA because they saw some of the work that I had done and they realized that communicators are important. So when I came on board, I was given a lot of really interesting projects that were already there. And what I think was interesting is that they realized that they needed more diversity, more creative thinking for a lot of problems to get their information out appropriately. So I've worked with the communications team, that's NASACOM, which is the general, all of the communications people within NASA, but also within STMD, which is the Space Technology Mission Directorate, which is where I work out of NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. And basically, the projects I've worked on is a couple of things, and I actually brought some of them. Out of This World is a series of books that are geared towards basically grades 4 through 12. And it's a partnership I developed with Out of This World. Um, the people who put it together is World Book Incorporated out of Chicago. I had an event that's called Science Fiction to Science Fact. And that's where I bring one of the NIAC researchers to a general public audience to talk about the science. And a person who was there in the audience who had brought her child was one of the editors at World Book in Chicago. And she basically said, "You've got so much content. This is really good for kids. We could do something creatively together, possibly." So we put together what's called a Space Act agreement so that we can work together because, you know, basically they're just taking content and doing it. NASA doesn't get any money from this. It's a fantastic partnership. And this one is astronaut Bonnie Dunbar. It's a story of her life and her study, which is made to order spacesuits. And she wants to 3D print custom spacesuits because astronauts' suits are bulky and it's not one size fits all. And sometimes the suits actually hurt the astronauts. They get bruises and scrapes and different things while they're trying to work. And she's trying to come up with an idea that's going to work around that. So this is one of the projects. I also do video productions, graphics, web content, animations, presentations. I put together events at science and technology museums around the country, media articles, impact stories. Some of the most fun is the successes and spinoffs of the NIAC studies that, the early stage NASA studies that we fund. These are spin-offs to help humankind, which is sort of fun.
That's really cool. And how would you see the Nyak project in the next years? Do you have any ideas for it?
Basically, we would continue to change the possible. Our motto is change the possible. It's taking an inkling of an idea in space that could be used for space exploration 10, 20, or 30 years out. We're very early stage. And to have it turn into a mission, to have it have a spin-off that changes life here on Earth for people to the benefit of humanity. So that's where I see NIAC as a program going in the future.
And could you explain the main goals of the NIAC program and what makes it unique compared to the other NASA projects?
Yes. You mean the NASA, other NASA programs?
Yes, and programs as well.
Okay, sure. NIAC is special within NASA, at least this is my personal opinion, in that it's taking an idea that's not even a reality yet. And we are trusting and funding people from all walks of life, NASA researchers, people who are, I guess, small businesses, even garage inventors, anybody who has an idea that's really going to change the way we do things positively, excuse me, we fund. So NIAC nurtures those visionary ideas. These are things that could transform future NASA missions with creative breakthroughs, things that are radically better or maybe even entirely new aerospace concepts. And part of my job is to engage America's innovators and entrepreneurs as partners in the journey. That's us in sort of a summary. It's ridiculously hard to get into to get a funding. It's because we're a small program. We don't have a lot of funding. There are so many people that are worthy that we would love to fund, but we just don't have the funding available. And that makes it very difficult to get a NIAC study. We fund all sciences. These ideas are not, we're not just a propulsion shop, it's every science across the board. And we have technical panels that basically down select from those. We have to get experts. Our senior science advisor, Ron Turner, has to get experts in order to sort of down select these people. We fund diverse institutions, as I said, small businesses, industry, government labs, even NASA researchers. And we even had a physical therapist who came up with a really cool idea to help astronauts exercise in zero gravity environments. It's really, really cool. So I love the diversity of it.
That's really cool. And let's go right now a bit into the STEM field and how
Mhm.
NIAC could contribute to encouraging diversity in STEM fields.
We work really hard on what's called DEIA, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. We get guidance from a very talented woman, Dina Lambert, at headquarters, who helps guide us in that realm. She's helping us right now. We have to, every kind of report that comes from an NIAC study, once it's submitted at the very end of the study, that gets put onto the nasa.gov website. But in order for it to be there, every US government entity, if they're going to put documents on the site, it needs to be what's called 508. And that means it's easily read, heard, or whatever from everybody who has a disability. So it's basically making the document easily understood by anyone. And if someone had a visual disability, they need to hear it. That's easily read, if you wanted to read the text itself. But what about those graphics? You need someone to write down a description of every single graphic in that. So we work very hard on that. All the videos I produce have captions. I do put on an event each year called Women of Science. It's at our annual symposium, which is an event that happens at different. We're going to be in Philadelphia in September of 2025, and you can be on virtually. But it's an annual event where all of our currently funded researchers come. They have to talk, give a 10, 20-minute presentation about their study, basically what it is, how does it work and why it's important. And they put it together through a little video. And we basically take those and we put them online afterwards, which is very exciting. So we invite NSBE, this is the National Society of Black Engineers, to be part of our technical panels. We've spoken with other groups, and we have an external council that guides us. There's a diversity within that group. And we also work with something called MUREP, which is a minority university research and education project within headquarters. So STEM is huge. I'm personally a fan of adding arts to that, so we call it STEAM. I'm working on that as well.
And at your events that you organized, have you ever had astronauts, or are you thinking of having maybe female astronauts?
At what types of events? At any
Um,
events?
yes, that you want to organize or you organized.
Well, you have to understand that astronauts are just people. People hold them really, really high on a pedestal, as they should. But it's really interesting. Some of the other researchers we have got ideas that are just amazing. But there's something about someone who's actually been there that's sort of fun to talk to. So yes, there are Bonnie Dunbar, who I mentioned earlier. Where's my book? Donnie Dunbar is a professor at the university, I think University of Texas, and she is an amazing human being. And the thing I really love about astronauts is that they have an interesting backstory of why they became an astronaut. And hers was she was a country girl in the middle of the Midwest, I believe, or the far western United States, and she lived on a farm and she used to love the star, watching the stars at night. And she talked about how her father was, I believe he had an airplane for crop dusting. And at a very young age, she was given, sure, just, 10, 12, sure, go fly the plane. So she had this interesting background. We've got on our external council, we have Mae Jemison, who is amazing. So Bonnie was a researcher. We worked with her because she was awarded a NIAC study, and that was for 2 years, almost three. And then Mae Jemison is on our external council. She's been with us 4 years. So yes, at some of our events, we have astronauts come, particularly female astronauts, because we want to inspire girls in science.
I think that's really cool because I interviewed NASA astronauts in person, and they're really cool and they do lots of things, but they're humans like us after all. And my last question on our podcast is, what inspired you to get involved with space technology and NASA's NIAC program?
I sort of fell into it. I sort of stumbled into it. I would like for anybody watching this podcast, I would highly recommend following your heart because I just sort of followed my joy. And when I was very young, I'm an old poop. So it was the Apollo era, and the Apollo program totally inspired me. Totally. It proved to me that anything was possible, even though there weren't women there. They were behind the scenes, we found out later, but you didn't see that front and center. But there was just something really inspiring about that. And I had an uncle who I grew up in Virginia, the state of Virginia in the United States. And I had an uncle who worked at Langley Research Center, which was south of us. And he was not an astronaut, he worked for NASA. He was a scientist in a wind tunnel and he used to do wind tunnel studies. And I used to talk to him about his work. And I found it endlessly fascinating. So in the back of my mind, I just sort of tucked it away that's really cool. I love space. I also love just going outside and laying down in the middle of the summer and watching fireflies floating up to the sky and then seeing the stars above twinkling. So there was something inspiring there as well. So later on, science fiction movies and books and all sorts of amazing things came out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And that sort of inspired me even more. And I was doing sort of art and science and communications I was working at Yale in their Department of Molecular Biophysics and Biochemistry. I was working with a pharmaceutical company. I had a freelance firm that I still run today that basically does work for anybody who needs scientific information distilled down. And that sort of creativity part got me in the door for NIAC because they had an offering for a job with this new little program called the NASA Institute for Advanced Concepts. It was at Georgia Tech, and that was 20 years ago. And out of 250 people, I got it because I wasn't like everybody else. I was different, and that's sort of a something for everybody who feels like they're different and they don't fit in. Sometimes it's a benefit. At least in my case, it was the fact that I had graphics communications, had a creative side as well as the science side was the exact match that they needed for this position. So hybrid people are very important. So that's sort of how I feel strongly about the people who are different, because all of our researchers, they think differently, that they are not doing what is considered normal. And for that, sometimes we shake up things a little bit with our little program because we're not doing what's normal. We're trying to think outside the box and think bigger. And some people accept it and are very excited by it. We have a huge following because of the inspirational part of the program. Um, so yeah, it's like my perfect job. I couldn't ask for a better place to work. It's been a joy.
Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Kathy, for joining today on my podcast. And it was great chatting with you about space. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.